to get cold, even though I had good glove liners on, you know, the right stuff. So when I started to blow on my fingers, and then, you know, you got to trust your gut on this stuff. That's the big thing. It didn't feel right anymore.
What felt differently?
You guys are live. The live time hit and I wasn't done setting up, so you can start anytime.
We're live now?
We're live right now. Go right ahead.
Well, you try to plug in.
Hey, we're live. I'm alive. That's good.
Good news.
Good news.
Good news. So there are some unusual features here to our program. This is Struggles of the Spirit. I'm your host, the Reverend Lee Udell, and we got to you before we expected. I have today a friend, and I'd like to say colleague, but I'm not a colleague anymore in the mountains, the way I used to be, or would have been with you. Shane, how do you pronounce your last name?
Bowley.
Bowley.
B-O-W-L-E-Y.
B-O-W-L-E-Y. And he does a lot of different things, but he's here today to talk about venture racing, which is not adventure. We weren't sure at first when we talked about the title of your work and experiences, but it's venturing out into whatever it is, the tropics or the mountains or the Arctic. Shane is willing to venture in almost any situation, and you venture to, you're in competition with others, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. There are teams from all over the world that send these, athletes into these different areas for races that duration of usually about a week. We're usually out nonstop, start to finish. Gun goes off, and you're out there.
And you sleep wherever you are.
You sleep wherever you are. You sleep on the ground. You sleep underneath a space blanket sometimes. I've slept in the rainforest under heavy downpours all through the night with leeches and so on, and howler monkeys throwing stuff at you, to the Canadian wilds where you're hunkered down in a snow cave or a tent on a frozen lake and trying to get as much sleep as you possibly can, because it's really about endurance, sleep deprivation. That's really the two key elements of the sport.
That's what wears the competitors down.
Yes, it wears you down as you travel day and night, doing multi-disciplines. For example, you might start out doing a 120-mile mountain bike ride, and then go from there into a canoe and paddle 50 miles, and then clunk face, and then snowshoe or ski somewhere, or run, or navigate, or any other multiple thing, getting from point A to point B on a course that is that you don't know about. You
haven't been there before.
Never been there before. You know where the start is, but it's usually at the beginning of a huge wilderness area, and they then give you maps with grid coordinates on them, and using just a map and a compass, you navigate from checkpoint to checkpoint, and you have a certain amount of time to get to checkpoints. The checkpoints, you simply log you in, and then you continue on to the next checkpoint.
There is a person at each checkpoint?
Sometimes there is. Sometimes there's just a little punch. Sometimes we have to, like in Borneo, when we went to Borneo, for example, and did a race there, one of the checkpoints was to swim out to this buoy in the ocean and to dive down and identify the object at the bottom of a reef.
Wow.
And come back up and then swim and go on to the next checkpoint. So at the checkpoint you got to that was manned by an individual, they would ask you what was the object at the last checkpoint so that they know you were there. And so you'd answer the question, they knew that you were there, and then you would continue on to the next checkpoint.
This sounds like a more serious TV survival situation.
Well, actually, the race, Survivor, that is now produced by Mark Burnett, is he's a former adventure racer.
Oh, really?
And I have done his races, and I know him, and he did so well with Eco Challenge, which was his main feature on Discovery Channel, that he went on to do Survivor. Eco's no longer in existence. The Eco Challenge no longer exists. He's doing Survivor now and doing very well with it. And so the race I did in Borneo was produced by him and has elements of Survivor in it, of course, because there's a little carryover there.
His style.
His style. A great deal of it Hollywoodish in some sense. it appeared to me that there was a lot of drama built into it. The cameras were always around the teams that were having problems, and that's what's good for the ratings, because people want to see the mishaps, so to speak, the accidents and the problems and the struggles and the strains of the individuals in these races. And that's the whole idea, to tune in on them.
Let me stop us for a second and to tell the public, because our beginning today here is a little different. This is Struggles of the Spirit. I'm your host, the Reverend Leland Udell, and we have this interactive program for you, which we do every Wednesday at 11:30 to 12:30. And so we'd like you to be interactive with us. On the bottom part of your screen is the telephone number of our studio, and you can get our technician, Bill, and call up and say, Bill, I want to talk to Shane and to Lee here about the show they have on right now. So we encourage you to call in at that number and speak with us about your reactions. I mean, a lot of people have been watching the Survivor film series on television, and so you might have some questions about that, since Shane knows about that kind of activity firsthand. So we look forward to hearing from you. We have an hour show, and we'd like your response, your ideas, your interest. We also have an email address on the bottom of the screen, so that if you're watching this program as a taped show, which we do, so we play it other times during the week, then you can get back to us by email. Just use the email address shown on the bottom of the screen, and we'll get back to you if you give us your address and the way you want us to reach you. So you can interact with us either way, live right now, today, Wednesday, or on email. So we're talking here with Shane Bowley, and it's great to have you here.
Thanks. It's great to be here. I know that you're a fan of the mountains as well. So
Always.
always, and
I started when I was 4 years old.
It's a great place to. It's a great, for me. I love being out in wilderness anyway, whether I'm an adventure racer or just a daytime hiker, taking the kids for a picnic. Just being out there for me is what it's really all about.
Absolutely. I was at a religious program half a year ago, and the leader of the program was saying how everyone is scared, frightened of wilderness. And I said to myself, what? I love wilderness. What is she saying? Wilderness isn't that way for me at all. It's intimate, it's personal, it's profound, it's taxing, yes. It's you never get bored. I mean,
yeah, I mean, the program that we're on, Struggles of the Spirit, is certainly a great way, a great lead into the fact that the races that I do, I find them to be more of a spiritual exercise than an athletic one. Certainly, I'm a very fit individual and can do these kinds of things. But when you're in it and the crap has hit the fan, so to speak, it's really the spirit that you dig into and bring forth to guide you through the ordeal that you're in that moment. And you look for inspiration, in which means to be in spirit. You get inspired by the area that you're in. There's a certain power in wilderness, a dimension of it that is unseen and silent, that sort of calls to you, and you recognize when you're in it that you're a part of it, and it helps you to move through it. It's only a struggle when you interpret what's happening to you as something odd or it shouldn't be happening. And the cool thing about wilderness is that it's neutral. It doesn't really care how you feel. It doesn't care whether you make it or not. It is just what it is. And you need to respond to it moment by moment in order to do the right thing when you're in that moment. So.
There have been moments for me, particularly when I was younger and a lot more physically active, where when I got out into the wilderness, according to how I felt at that particular moment, I really would kiss the ground. It was just, I just loved the wilderness, the rock and the trees and the plants and the views, and it just was a very, very holy, special place for me.
Yeah, it's a very humbling place. We were talking before the show started about a recent ski trip I did where I went out in the mountains and it was 15 degrees below zero and the wind was howling like crazy. I had a specific plan in mind, and I went out and realized that I had a feeling that I looked around at where I was, and I was by myself. I was in waist-high powder, and I was looking around, and I thought, this doesn't feel right for me to really be here right now, and I shouldn't really continue on. If I were to get hurt right now, I would cause a lot of problems, not only for myself, or a lot of people that have to come in there and rescue me. And so I turned around and I went out, and I came out the way I came in, and there is no place for ego in the wilderness in that sense. You've really got to leave yourself behind in a sense, and not to hang your head in shame, because sometimes there's races I haven't finished. There are times we've done really well. There are times when we haven't finished an event. And we gave it the best we could, and it's okay. I'd rather live to race again.
Amen.
Live to climb again. The mountain summit will always be there. There's no reason you can't go back. And to just be there is the key thing for me. To just show up and be willing to do these events is really what it's all about. The process of getting there. It takes huge amounts of preparation to take a team from here to, say, to Borneo. You have to get financing, sponsorships. You got to put all the logistics together. There's 4 of you. There's 4 mountain bikes. There's climbing gear. There's food.
Passports.
Shots. I had to have rabies shots. Every shot you could think of before I went there. There were a lot of problems there. There were a lot of diseases. When I got ringus tree poisoning, many individuals came down with leptospirosis, which is a disease that attacks their central nervous system.
Oh.
Some athletes that have gone there, this was in the year 2000, have not competed since because of the diseases that they have acquired, these rare exotic diseases that are there. We were in the oldest rainforest in the world, called the Danum Reserve, which is full of orangutans and leeches and wild boars and wild howling deer and all kinds of interesting species of animals, and old headhunter places. There's still, you go there and there's still headhunter, there's still the skulls in the longhouses.
The longhouses are still there?
They're still, yeah. The natives still live in longhouses there. And many of them were, the ones that were in the, we went through a series of islands in the Celebes Sea, and they were mainly boat builders and seaweed farmers. So they grew seaweed and built boats and fished and all that. And, they had these elaborate tattoos, and just like you'd think of in an adventure book or comic book, just similar.
It's all true. Huh?
It's all true, and very, very happy people for the most part. Even though in our affluent culture that we live in, sometimes I think things are a curse because these people had nothing, but they seem to have a higher level of happiness than the average American, which I'm not sure what that says about us, but. I gave a gentleman a piece of sandpaper, and he burst into tears.
Really?
Yeah. He had never seen sandpaper before. He didn't know what it was. Yeah. Didn't know what, and it was a valuable tool for him because he could use it to sharpen his arrows or whatever, but he didn't know how to thank me enough, and, I was like, it's just a piece of sandpaper. But to him, it was an invaluable thing. A tool.
It sounds like you have a lot of respect for the people who live in these areas as well as for your fellow climbers. Yes,
there's the people in certain cultures I've been to, the natives of those cultures or those areas have us hold the areas they're in with a certain degree of sacredness, a reverence for the wilderness that we're traveling through, and to a point that for example, in Borneo, the natives there, they talk about the spirit in the woods. And it's really important not to disturb the spirit in the woods because fires will do weird things. The spirits will get angry and the fire will go out on its own. or the smoke will blow at you incessantly, even though the wind's going, you know, there's all these weird, and it certainly is true that I saw an example of that when we were traveling through an area that I noticed a lot of teams were yelling a lot and looking for directions and which way to go, and kind of lost a bit. You know, I think it's over here, no, it's over here. That sort of dialogue was going on. And I noticed that the monkeys were really upset with us, and they were throwing all kinds of things at us, these coconut things and stuff. And we had clearly angered the spirits in the forest. You could tell. There was a lot more clamoring going on, and it was just a lot noisier. In other times, you'd be traveling through the forest, and it was almost like entering a church. It was just
really
quiet.
So it was the other competitors who were
correct.
bringing that out.
Right, right. They were bringing that out, and at this point, there was only 2 of us competing. Well, all 4 of us were around, but 2 of us, they'd separated our team and had us go on a special assignment, my friend and I. So there was only 2 of us at that time. And we just basically followed the rules of the game, which is we've got our map, we've got our compass, we've got our bearing. Irrespective of what's going on around you, you stay on that bearing, and we got right to where we needed to go. And it's easy to second guess yourself. But the compass never lies. The bearing doesn't lie.
Well,
these are things that you learn with experience, because I have gotten lost many times. So.
Well, one thing that used to upset me sometimes, going by compass, there are some places where you have iron deposits in the mountainsides, and you don't know for sure whether the compass is responding to the iron or it's going to magnetic north. You know, which is it? So then you don't trust the compass. Did you ever have that trouble?
Yes, that's why I do a lot of navigation competitions called Rogaines, which are becoming very popular. They're very popular in Europe now, but they're not as popular in the United States. Rogaines is an acronym. It means Rugged Outdoor Group Activity involving navigation and endurance. It's unfortunately also the name of a hair treatment aid, which doesn't really help the sport that much. But anyway, to answer your question, you've always got a backup for everything. So if you're not sure about your compass, you still got the map, and your map has the features that are symbolically shown on the map. So if I'm looking at a map and I've got my compass and I'm following a certain bearing, well, as I'm looking at my route, I also compare my route to the map. So I should be seeing that hill. There's that ridge. There's that river. There's that bridge. Whatever. And so I've got a backup. And you also have what you call a catching feature, so that you say to yourself, well, gee, I'm traveling in this direction. If I don't see this lake by X time, based upon my rate of speed, then I need to stop and go back to my last known point and start over again.
Yeah, that's always, I learned in mountaineering, that's always the technique. If you get confused, lost, you go back to your last known point and do it over again from there.
It's funny, there's lots of woodsmen, even in Vermont, who have a compass, and they take it with them, and they go out, and they get lost. And they pull out their compass, and, well, I've got my compass, I'm fine, right? Well, if you pull out your compass, what's it going to tell you? It's only going to tell you where north is.
Right.
It's not going to give you any other information. And it's great to know where north is, but hey, which direction did you come from? Where is the car? So it's important to have a plan, know where you're going, when you're going to be back, have a sense of direction. Take a bearing at the car, away from the car. Like you say, the car will affect because it's metal, it will affect the reading of the compass. So step away from the car, good 25, 30 feet. Take your bearing, direction of travel, and then use that as a reverse bearing for return trip, and also to cognitively pick up waypoints as you're traveling. So, for example, I'm going in a northerly direction. Hey, there's a hill that's very distinctive over here. I should see this hill. Right now it's over my right shoulder. On my way back, I should see it over my left shoulder, right?
Yes.
And so then you can pick up little features as you're moving to get back with. There's a lot of things to think about. Fading light. It takes twice as long in the winter time. Takes a lot more food. Takes a lot more fluids, as you know from winter experiences. So you have to have a plan about where you're going into and how to exit out. And
one of the darndest things that happened to me in winter mountaineering sometimes is for some reason, well, I guess I know the reason. If the snow is very deep, and you're walking along on the top of the snow, it might be corn snow, and all of a sudden you fall down into this depth of the snow, and what's happened is there's a tree down below,
Right.
and it hasn't held, it's kept the snow from getting compact, and so you fall down, and so the surface of the snow is way up there somewhere, and you've got to climb up on the tree branches somewhere to get back to the top of the
That's a
surface
common.
of the snow.
That's a common thing in an alpine tundra ecosystem. Is that what you're alluding to? I think is what we call a spruce nest.
Yeah, yeah.
So it creates an air pocket.
Yeah.
And I've actually fallen into one time. I was in the Bolton Valley backcountry up by Ravenswind, Cottonbrook Basin. I was up there. It was pretty cold. It was deep, deep snow back before global warming. I fell into a spruce nest upside down. So I was hanging upside down. My skis were up in the branches.
Good Lord.
And the more I kicked, the more crap, the more snow and ice came flying down on me. So it was quite an extrication process to get. I had to take my pole and poke my skis off. So I kind of flipped around on my feet and then dug out. And it was quite a process. And, it could have turned into a problem had I have, if you panic or something, you've got to really learn how to keep your head about yourself. And just calm down and take a deep breath and go,
You're trapped in
okay.
a snow pit.
You're trapped in a snow pit, and in a rescue, if you're ever in wilderness and you're getting a situation that's not to your favor, the best thing to do is to sit down and calm down and
Right.
take a good look at stuff and see what your assets and resources are available to you in that moment. I've always been one of the things I learned from this sport is that I've always been taken care of when I'm out there.
What do you mean?
It's almost like unseen forces are at work sometimes. There was a time when I was in southern Spain on the Spanish-French border doing a race.
Pyrenees?
In the Pyrenees, and a woman had died, and the helicopters were coming in.
In your group?
Yeah. And I and my friend had gotten just so lost. We had no idea where we were. We were going through this really, really thick terrain that had these vines called wait-a-minute vines. So you'd walk into these vines and they'd halt your process, your progress, and they'd have all these thorns. So I was just, you're just full of holes, bleeding everywhere. You'd have to go forward. These things would completely stop you in a thick mat. You'd have to back up, which is why they call them wait-a-minute vines. Wait a minute, you got to come back and find another route around them. Well, anyway, we're in the middle of this area that I've never been in before. No money, no passports, no ability to really speak the language. My buddy could speak some Spanish, but so we're sitting, we're in the middle of nowhere. Like, what are we going to do? So I took my own advice. I took the advice I had just given our viewers a moment ago. We sat down and took some deep breaths and said, okay, what are we going to do to get out of this mess? So we decided to pick out some features, which we did, and we followed them to a little village. And this little tiny, tiny village, and with a little campsite nearby. And
were others there?
Yeah, there were others there. Well, all of a sudden, this is what I mean by unseen forces at work. This gentleman just comes walking up to me in a really nice suit, and he says, "I speak perfect English. What can I do for you?" So I explained my situation to him, and they got on a phone and called.
Phone?
Yeah, there was a phone, there was a phone there. There was one phone. So they phoned a rescue party, and they came and got us and pulled us out of there. And and then the race was continued the next day. Yeah, it was a stage type thing. But it seems like that happens a lot. That kind of uncanny, synchronistic event that just occurs out of nowhere, and where you're in a situation that's hairy, and the next thing you know, there's the help for you. You know, and in these races, there's so much suffering in these races that opportunistically sometimes things happen to you that keep you alive, that, you know, where you normally would be in a lot of trouble or whatever. You know, a local comes along who knows the area and helps you out of a mess, or, you know, helps you navigate through stuff, and, you know, that happens all the time.
I'm sure our viewers, if they were here, no one's phoning in yet, they ought to. I think a viewer would say, why do you do this, Shane? Do they pay you that much money to race on these situations? I mean, it sounds kind of dangerous.
It is a dangerous sport. There have been some deaths. It's the best for me as an we classify ourselves, adventure racers classify ourselves as outdoor athletes. There's everything involves multidiscipline, from climbing to mountain biking to good paddling skills, white water, scuba sometimes, even parachuting, even jumping sometimes is involved in these races. So it's the best arena for me as an outdoor athlete to challenge myself against one of the greatest foes of all time, Mother Nature. I mean, like I say, who's it's a neutral entity, you know, that is not interested in how your well-being is or what's going on, even despite of what I just said, though. That's the paradox here. In spite of what I just said, here's this wilderness system that would kill you in a heartbeat, yet there's this unseen forces at work keeping you alive. You know, sometimes I feel like I have a guardian angel, you know, watching over me.
Maybe you do.
It wouldn't surprise me. I certainly realize that we all, in a sense, have access to that dimension.
You can't prove it, but sometimes
no,
you
can't
experience it.
understand it with the mind.
No.
It can only be felt. You know, that's the problem with it. Spirit is that you can't understand spirit with the mind. It's not in the same realm. It's not in the same dimension. But it's inherent in every human being as their core self.
You can't measure it in the metric system or any other system. It doesn't work that way.
Correct. Correct. It can only be felt as your deepest self.
I'm intrigued with those vines that wouldn't let you go.
Oh, the wait a
further.
minute vines?
Yeah, the only thing close to that, at least in my experience, where I've been in the spruce thicket, and you know, spruce trees stunted and very dense and full of these spruce needles.
Later on, I discovered that the Spanish name, which eludes me, for that area is the name of that plant.
Oh.
So that plant has had such an impact on that area that the area is named after that plant. And the people there, when they go hiking, they wear their Sunday best. So you see, when you're at a trailhead there in the Pyrenees, on the Spanish border, people pull up on a Sunday in vans and cars, and you think they're going to church, and they're going hiking.
Why do they do that?
I don't know. I never had a chance to really ask them. But we traveled through there on a Sunday morning, and it's uncanny, but you're walking through this area for these high peaks and these trails, and all of a sudden a beautiful girl comes down the trail wearing a dress and pearls and everything. It's like, what are you doing here?
Yeah, kind of incongruous.
But people have a reverence for the areas, you know, and Vermonters have a reverence we have a reverence here for the Green Mountains. I was born here. I was born in Burlington, and I love Vermont. I love the mountains. I love the streams. I love everything about it. And for me, as an adventure racer, this is a great place to live because it's a great place to train. You know, if I lived in southern Florida, it would be much more difficult for me to mimic a mountaineering sort of environment that I might travel into. Certainly a tropical rainforest would apply in the southern heat of Florida, but in Vermont I can get all the training I need. I can do whitewater. I just lots of places to climb, lots of places to practice navigation skills, winter mountaineering skills, skiing, snowshoeing, that whole lots of great places to do that here.
Well, I kind of asked you a question. If you win a race, do you get paid for it?
Yeah, you get prize money. the top prizes I think are usually, for Borneo is like $250,000.
Wow.
$250,000 for that race, and it staggers down from there. The money absolutely means nothing to me. The whole money thing of it. If someone, if I could just say that, there are professional basketball players, football players in our culture being paid millions and millions of dollars.
Yes.
I would gladly do my sport for a much less figure than that and be absolutely delighted to be doing so. You know what I mean? I would do it for, my current salary. I'd love to do my sport at my current salary as a full-time employee of an automotive dealership. I would love to do that, I don't get paid for this, but I wouldn't do it for money anyway. It's for passion. Because I love the outdoors. And it's a great sport for people who love the outdoors and want to challenge themselves a little bit more and meet other people of a similar ilk and to connect with, actually, I've made some great friendships and have some good training partners now, good climbing partners, paddling partners, all over the state that I can hook up with and do these things. Although many people, I have a difficult time getting people to go with me sometimes because they think that, well, we got to go run 100 miles or something, and that's not necessarily the case. I do run 100-mile runs, but I wouldn't do that with a friend that wasn't ready for it. You know what I mean? I wouldn't do that to anyone. So that's.
You're able to stay in physically good shape. I know you have a regular job besides. How do you stay in such great athletic shape?
For anyone out there who struggles with a fitness plan, I'm sure there are some of our viewers out there are wondering, how do I get fit? I don't have any time. And I work, 44 to 50 hours a week on average. The best advice I would give anyone would be to make it part of your lifestyle, the exercise that you choose to do, and make it something that you like to do. If you like to walk, if you like to run, ride a bike, incorporate that into your fitness plan because that's something you're more likely to pursue. I love to run. I like to walk. I ride, so I oftentimes ride my bike back and forth to work as a means of training, but also for my own well-being. I mean, I feel it's a great way to decompress before the day starts. It's a great way to decompress after a stressful day, get on the bike and just get out there in the birds. And I'm surprised I don't see more people out there. That's the shocking part. And I commute pretty much, I ride just about every day. I haven't been lately because of logistics with kids and stuff like that. Sometimes I have to drive, but most of the time I ride. So I get that training, and then right after work I usually go out for a run or a ride or something like that. And then at my lunch hour I go to a gym and lift weights. So I incorporate into my lunch hour as well. And so it somehow all kind of fits together. And then one day in the week I will go out and do a long, sustained, endurance-based training. Or it might be multidiscipline. I might go for a long bike ride followed up by a run, or a long paddle followed by a mountain bike, or something like that. Try to mix it up a little bit. It's easy to do this stuff when you like it. If you hate riding a bike, then don't go buy a bike and expect to get in shape by going home every night after work and riding a bike. You're just not going to get on it. But if you like to walk after work, go for a 30-minute walk. It's good for you. And it's easily accomplished, and you'll feel better, and your life will be better.
Most doctors say that the best exercise program is walking.
As an adventure racer, you will do a lot of walking. It doesn't matter. Most of the stuff they throw at you, like for example, most of the mountain bike rides I do, or I've done in races, have been unrideable courses for some of it. So you might have to walk the bike 30 miles and then ride another 60 or something. So you have to learn how to like walking. And the funny part is that you burn as many calories walking a mile as you do running a mile.
Really?
A lot of people don't realize that. It just takes longer. It's going to take you longer to walk the mile than it is to run it, but you're going to burn the same number of calories.
That's interesting.
So, there's always something to, and you really, something else I've discovered too, it's difficult to be spiritually happy if you're physically unhappy.
Yeah.
If you're in pain or you know, a lot of pain is, you know, suffering is self-inflicted, most of it that I've seen, you know, that if you get out and do something, you know what I mean? It's not, get active. It makes your life a lot less stressful. In fact, I can imagine not being physically fit. There will come a day when I will not be able to do this anymore. Don't get me wrong, I understand all that. I'm 48 years old, it takes me longer to recover than it used to. I have to take more time off. If I go for a long run on Saturday, I might have to take Sunday off, where in the past I could go for all day Saturday and then part of the day on Sunday and make it. But
I can understand that because I'm 76, I can't believe it, and what I used to do, I just can't do anymore at 76, which is hard. I mean, after all, like I gave you a beloved pack of mine, a pack board, and because I knew I couldn't load it up like I used to. And,
yes.
it's hard to have to give up things that you love.
Yes. And that's why I think that, for me, the focus of the sport isn't, like I said, the victories or the process is nice, the kind of person I've discovered who I am based upon the stuff I've done. I'm going to have to taper things down as I age a bit. I'm not going to be able to, you know, get on my bike and ride 40 miles. I might have to taper it down to 10. You know what I mean? But I'll still be out there. In fact, people still ask me. I've been running now for, 30 years. I've been a pretty competitive runner. And people still get shocked when they see me and I haven't seen for a while. They say, "You still running?" I say, yeah, I am. And they seem surprised because they think that there's a myth in our culture that running is somehow bad for your joints and stuff. And I find just the opposite to be true. And I've spoken with many running doctor friends of mine who are runners as well, and they say the same thing's true for them, that their knees and joints are actually stronger than the average person's.
It doesn't wreck your knees.
It doesn't wreck your knees. Your body was designed to run. We don't have sharp claws. We don't have sharp teeth. We have legs to run from the predators. So
You're a lot of fun, Shane.
So
I don't know. I think we're running out of time. I have about is it 25 after?
no, it's 7 minutes after. 7 minutes after 12.
Oh, okay. My watch is not correct.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
You want to make some comments about something that really means it's important to me. You don't ever conquer a mountain. I hear this about, and also the language in mountaineering is summiting. You know, I mean, very often, at least in my experience, it's more delightful on the way up than it is to get to the top. Sometimes the top is kind of boring, but it's you want to comment about this?
Sure. There's a fever that some mountaineers call summititis.
Yeah, I call it summit fever.
Yeah, summit fever or summititis, or even in the airline industry, pilots might call it get-home-itis. You know, get home in that plane, and the desire to get home or to make it to the summit clouds your judgment about where you're at with it in the environment that you're in. For example, the into thin air catastrophe on Everest, where you're leading a party to the summit, and you're at Hillary Step, and you're backed up, and you can see the storm coming from the distance. Yet the desire to get to the summit is more important than the actual impending, problem that's on the horizon. They could see it coming. That's where I talked earlier about ego in wilderness. You cannot have, and you are a small being out there. You are a little me out there. It does not care whether you live or die, as evidenced by the recent catastrophes that we've seen on Everest, and a British guy, the gentleman that just died on Everest, who was actually alive for quite a period of time with people walking by him, going to the summit, and ignoring him.
Oh.
I don't believe deliberately. He was just so out of it that he couldn't even raise his hand to really ask for help, and he died. You have to know when to, and there are people who die, and their families, their kids and wives and kids sitting at home having dinners alone. There'll be families sitting down to dinner tonight where dad's not there because he's dead on a mountain somewhere. And people ask, why does this happen? The people who do this type of activity have learned to live with a certain degree of uncertainty in their lives. Most people want to have a certain degree of safety in their lives. And they sort of lay down a framework throughout the day of how safe they're going to be. They have a plan about their life and how safe it's going to be. There are certain types of people who the lack of, the uncertainty of life is appealing to them, and it certainly appeals to me too. You have to learn to live with uncertainty because you don't have any safety. There's only an illusion of it anyway, even in our modern culture. Jesus said that when he said 2 men will be working in the field, one will be taken and one will be left.
Right.
You never know when your time is. So there really is no safety anywhere. There's an illusion of it. And people go, these guys, what are they doing leaving their family? They have no desire to die out there. But at the same time, they answer the call internally to climb these things. I answer the call internally to go do these things in exotic locations with no intent to die, but to fully be alive and human and authentic in that process. Not that process defines me, but it certainly adds a certain spice to my life that wouldn't normally be there. It's okay if I stop being an adventure racer tomorrow. It's not the end of the world. It's not who I am really anyway. The more I identify with that role, the more I suffer as I leave it, right? But I don't plan on identifying with it that greatly. I'm going to do it as long as I can, and then the next thing will come along. And might be sitting on the couch playing my guitar. That's okay too. It doesn't really matter what form it takes. It's just following your passion, and you can't really, the ego, to go to the top of the mountain, oh, I made it to the top, So, how many people died on the way, and how many people suffered for you to get to where you got to? Does that count? I mean, you know what I mean? Because to put a person on top of Mount Everest is a monumental undertaking. Tons of Sherpas and gear and, oxygen bottles, and the place is getting littered with crap and trash, and that's all going on.
And dead bodies.
And dead bodies, and
it's pretty gruesome.
There's an effort now to clean it up. There's a worldwide effort now to get those bottles off of base camp.
No, that's good.
That's good, and the human excrement that's everywhere, so, there's going to, people will die. People will continue to die in these areas. I mean, even in our neighboring White Mountains, there are rescues going on there all the time with people getting in trouble. It's a very dangerous place. It's very, but that's the whole idea, is that I wouldn't do this if I knew the outcome. If I knew the end result, it would be so hollow and boring. Why would I want to do something where I know I'm going to, our lives would be, we'd all want to exit out of here if we knew what the outcome was going to be. That's what gives spice to life. What's going to happen? What's going to happen when I go into this hostile area? What am I going to see? What am I going to experience? Am I going to come out alive?
No one asked that question about, do you want to go down and get a pizza?
Yeah.
Local pizzeria?
Yeah, and just pursuing that I just couldn't imagine not being alive and not having that passion in my life about. And it shows up in other areas as well. I play guitar too, and that's very meaningful to me. And I spend a lot of time at that at night. I play my kids to sleep at night, and that means a lot to me too. So you can find it anywhere. Doesn't have to be an adventure racing. Doesn't have to be knitting. It could be preaching the word of the Lord. It just, you can find it anywhere.
You're an interesting man, Shane.
Thanks.
You are. You are.
Well, I was thinking about coming on today, and I was thinking how, Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness.
Right.
And I would have to imagine that he came away from that experience probably learning. He probably learned a great deal while he was out there, as I do, and as you probably have
Oh,
yourself.
absolutely.
We talked about that earlier. When you're in that, there's a power out there that is so huge and immense when you're standing, like, say, just in the Rockies someplace, or even in the Green, even standing on top of Mount Mansfield or Camel's Hump, when you're standing there and you're looking around, there's this pulse of power that's present that is so huge that it sort of softens you a little bit. Your little me doesn't quite feel so important anymore, and you start to connect to a bigger space, and you start to expand a little bit, and you can feel a little more ability to breathe a bit more. That's happened to me every time I've gone out into wilderness experiences. And I don't believe you have to go there to experience it, though. It could happen anywhere. You know what I mean? When you let go of this little mind-created me that we're always hooked into, you know?
At the end of the day, sometimes when I'm walking just from my house, crossing the road to my mailbox and pick up the paper in the mail, and the sun generally seems to set down the end of the road.
Yeah.
It has that illusion about it. And for me, there's a holiness about seeing that sun as it's not the sunset. I'm not talking about the sunset.
Right.
I'm talking about the glow of the sun as it slowly disappears and sheds its light. It's a religious experience.
Yeah, and I talked about how making my fitness level as part of my lifestyle. I had a similar experience the other day, and I was riding my mountain bike. I was coming up Main Street by UVM, and as I got to the top of UVM, I looked over at Camel's Hump, which I often do, which is right there in the east, and over its right shoulder, there's this little beam of sun coming up over the mountain, and I was just speechless with just gratitude and the sacredness of it, and the silence, and words. This is where words fail. Words really can't.
They do.
They really, because words come from the mind, and the mind could never describe spirit. So you know, it's much greater than any word could ever express that reality of that dimension. You know, and so I totally relate to what you're saying. You can have it anytime. Driving to work this morning, you notice the same thing looking at the Adirondacks and the lake and this immense beauty that is surrounding us all the time. You know, we live in paradise.
We do.
We really do live in paradise. People are always looking outside for paradise. You know, when this happens, I'll be happy, and when this happens, you know, forget all that. Be happy now, you know? There's an ancient Zen master who used to say, what's wrong with right now? You know, what is wrong with right now? We're having a nice little chat, and everything's going great, you know? I mean, this is where life happens, right now, you know?
Absolutely.
You know, and you lose that when you're caught in that mind stream, that noise in your head all the time about what you got to do and what's happening, and so did this to me, and you know how people walk around with their stories and their, you know, and they get caught up in that, which is really just a bundle of thoughts.
Yep.
But you notice how you and our experiences were that when we were quiet, then that dimension was allowed to we were able to experience it more fully. In my experiences in these races and being out in wilderness is what brings that on. As you get physically taxed, you become softer and softer as well. That's another thing that happens to you out there.
Softer?
You become softer. You become...
You want to tell us what that means for you?
It means you let go of who you are, in a sense, and you become really much more focused on the immediate needs of the moment. Like, for example, after coming back from a race, usually when I get back into this culture, or this, you know, our civilization, as we say, because I'll be out in the middle of nowhere for, you know, a week at a time, come back, and the first thing I notice is that it's really noisy here.
Yes, it is. It is.
It's very, very noisy. Everybody's always busy doing something. And we're certainly doing something when we're competing, but it's on a much more primitive level. It might be just walking through the woods or whatever, or mountain biking or paddling a river, that you have the ability to really to let go of who you think you are, and what your, your age, how much money you make, what kind of car you drive, what house you live in, all the content of your life goes away. And you're just I could just say, I'm a man doing this paddling thing now. And it's like, it's a great feeling of freedom to become primitive again, to become more, these races force you to become more animalistic and more of a Native American might be, where you're much more in tune with your environment and you're always listening for sounds, and because your survival depends upon it. If I'm on a river, for example, I want to make sure that I can hear the roar of the whitewater before I get to it so I can get ready for it.
Absolutely.
If I'm lost in thought about how much money I have in my checking account, I'm going to miss that moment to get ready or whatever, or to open it up. So that's what I mean by softening. And it's very, like I say, it's tremendously freeing. You don't have that identity kind of hanging on you, because you've let it all go, because it's not important. At least for that moment, it's not important.
There are certain sounds that you hear in the wilderness that, or it doesn't always have to be wilderness, but sounds that the average public doesn't realize even exist. For example, I've heard the sounds of the pine cones opening, the bracts that are tight, holding the seeds tightly inside. When they dry out to a certain extent, and they begin to open up and rise up, and then the seeds can fall out and plant another tree. But there's a sound of the bracts opening, and most people don't know that exists. There was another time I was in the wilderness. It was in spring, and the snow had melted, and the leaves had been really tightly pressed against the earth because there was a lot of snow on it, and they were dried, and I heard the sound of crinkling sound, and I realized what I was hearing was the new shoots of life pushing up through the dead, dried leaves, which
Wow.
I've never heard that sound again. But and then of course the sound of ice booming in the winter on the lake.
Yeah.
Those, and then many other kinds of sounds. But the average public person has never heard of these things. They miss them. You know?
Yes, they miss those, and the background silence out of which they come, the stillness out of which they, like I noticed when I was in the mountains not long ago, and the sounds are much further apart in spaces usually, and much usually purer of tone, whether it be a bird calling or a raven or whatever. And then you're back into that silence again. So it's sound, silence, sound, silence. It's not constant sound, 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 sound. Like we have people driving in their radios on all the time, and the cell phone in their hand and their coffee, and all, and that covers up, all that noise covers up that dimension that we're talking about. Yeah. That silence and that stillness, that dimension that out of everything comes out of that dimension. A silent, invisible realm that gives life to form is covered up by the noise of our culture and the thought process. The constant. Everybody has voices in their head. No, if you were to tell me that you had voices in your head, I'd go, yeah, I got them in my head too. So it's kind of cool. 5 minutes, okay. So my biggest. If I could just, in closing, say that...
I'd like you to sum up. We have 5 minutes to sum up. And those of you who haven't phoned me, I'm disappointed you haven't called and talked with Shane, but that's your choice. You're going to sum up our conversation this hour?
Sure. I would just like to, just to summarize, what adventure racing has taught me is to have reverence for what we've talked about, paradise. That this is paradise. It easily supports all of us. This planet, everything we have, everything we're wearing right now, was given to us. This cup we're drinking. This is all. This all came from the earth. And at some point, you know, we're going to have to define when is enough and when are we going to stop consuming, and just get back to having a reverence for the mountains, the ecosystems that are struggling now, and you know, the outer, in my view, the outer is always a manifestation of the inner.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're living in a polluted planet that we're slowly destroying, that's a manifestation of something that's going on inside of us. And
It's our pollution.
it's our pollution, it's our crap being projected out there as suffering into the world, which is essentially a paradise. And I'm just saying that for me personally, every day I try to end suffering in myself so that I can end suffering in others. If I'm peaceful within, then I'm not going to create any kind of problem outside of me. And there'll be peace outside of me. And that's what wilderness has taught me. That's what adventure racing has taught me, is that, you know, everything is really paradise. And I came here to be a sea otter of the universe in a sense, and I came here to play. I know God gave me the best playground that any outdoor athlete could ever ask for. And living in Vermont is a big playground for me. And I play in it all the time. And that's what I was meant to do. That's what my passion is. And I feel sort of like, it's going to sound like maybe cliche or something, but I feel God smiling upon me when I'm doing my thing. You know what I mean? I feel His, you know, His blessing almost.
That's not a cliche.
Well, whatever.
That's
you know, yeah. Yeah, I guess it's not a cliche. But anyway, that's... it's easy for me to do it because it just fulfills every aspect of my spiritual needs and physical needs, and it's just great stuff. And the reverence for the planet, and I think it's great that I'd like to see more people get out. More people get out and start looking at what's going on, how beautiful it is. It's like, geez, we really need to save this. That's what I feel. The more people go out there and do this stuff, the more people are going to say, this is really worth saving, you know. And there are a lot of people out there working hard to save this planet. And you know, I want to talk about, you know, not all mountaineers have big egos and want to make the summit. I know there's a local gentleman, Jeff Talbot, who's an eye surgeon. He's just moved to Salt Lake City in the last year. Now he's doing surgery on the Tibetan people as a service to them. He's been on Everest several times. That's the kind of energy that's, you know, that we need. More of that giving, you know. How do we give back to them? How do we give back to the earth? We're always taken. How do we give back? What do we do? And there are people active, and I'm active in giving back. There are things I do on trails and so on. So.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank
Shane.
you very, very much.
And it's been a religious experience talking with you, Shane. So thank you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It's neat.
Yeah. Yeah.